So the first step is an idea and your thumbnail. So I thought that I like fantasy, I like characters, and I like drawing things out of scenes. I very illustrational approach. So I decided to just kind of lay down the scene of a witch brewing some potions. So in my thumbnail, I just have like the witch at a table with a cauldron and a lantern and a very basic background, just the most basic details for the first kind of run through. And then with this next sketch is where I bring it out on the actual paper that I'll be doing the entire piece on, and that's where I get the slightly more detail. There's more lines in her hair, she has a more fleshed out expression, and you can see things like the stairs and the bookshelf in the background, as well as some items on the table there. And some things are still really vague, such as the position of the bird and the details. There's not a whole lot of detail in this. There's all very vague gestural movements. Nothing's too dark yet. It's all real light, just kind of planning. No erasing, just getting ideas out. And the third one is where I finally take some intentionality with these decisions. I've found a composition that works for me, and so I go back with stronger lines and more detail. I look for the references that I need, which are very common, either looking, especially with the hand, I looked at my own hand for that one, as well as for the bird, getting perspective right, such as on the bookshelf. I finally went and got some cleaner lines there, as well as added more details to the table and other things in the background. Just cleaner lines, but still trying to be soft and starting to erase a little bit the stuff that we decide that we don't want and keeping for certain the stuff that we do. So with this one drawing, I'm using just one soft tip ink pen, and for my first kind of pass at it, I am starting in the foreground mainly, and I'm keeping on the general details, and I'm just kind of going once over and getting the most general stuff first. I'm starting at the very front, and then I am slowly working my way back, and I am leaving room open for future details as it goes on. Like you can see, I've left that part of the cauldron empty because I planned to later take a white pen, and also keeping in mind my coloring process, keeping that open so that I don't have to fix anything later. And I'm being very deliberate with all my strokes, but I'm not going overly thick. This is just the first pass at clean lines. It's good to note here that all of this footage that is being played is at 20 times the speed, and that it actually took me for every single stage from the sketch and as well as the inking and the painting, all took me around 40 minutes to an hour for each individual stage. And as well as you can see here, I've finished kind of going all the way to the background with the basic lining, and so now I'm going back in, starting with the bookshelf, and then I'll be moving on to the girl here in a second, that I'm adding in the tinier details now that I've gotten the basic shape set up. So I'm adding textures and folds, as well as I'm going to add shadows and tiny lines to add more personality and to the piece. You need to have those textures and the varying line thickness to create a more interesting picture. If you just have it all flat, then it's going to look a bit more boring. And here I start to go back and erase the sketch that's underneath, which reveals often a lot of different stuff. Stuff that was covered by pencil, but then you realize that now you need to go back and fix with marker. So I'm going back in here and I'm fixing a lot of things that I couldn't see before when I just had the sketch. As well, you have to be careful here because when you are erasing, sometimes you can lift things up, so I'm going to need to go back over with the pen after this and complete the sketch because some things get rubbed off and lots of things need correcting. And so here we have my kind of final piece here in terms of inking, but I'm going to need to go back and fill in a couple more details that I will realize after I've finished the painting process. So here's kind of my initial painting, and it's done in watercolor as I do most things, because watercolor I find is kind of the easiest and most versatile. It's very forgiving in that, and my painting process is very simple in that I just selected kind of my colors. I decided that I wanted to go with kind of heavy on the greens and purples in this one because it's kind of a witchy atmosphere, and so I start with just the very, very lightest, and it's just a whole bunch of layering on top of layering on top of layering, going back and back and back with darker colors. And you start with the lightest and then you work darker. And watercolor is very easy and forgiving for this. On the other hand, between inking and painting, and as you're going back and forth more and more with this when correcting details, you do want to make sure that the ink and the watercolor is absolutely dry before you switch to the other, because the watercolor can bleed into the ink and vice versa if you don't wait. As well, I made absolutely certain that I had a waterproof pen for this exact purpose, and you got to make sure that it's not going to bleed as soon as you start putting the watercolors down. Now, here's my finished piece, and it's the only difference between this one and the previous one is that it's just more layers of shading and coloring, as well as making sure to go back and get the tiniest details, the lines on the smallest things. This is where really the tiniest details, the highest amount of scrutiny comes in. And with this finished piece, with the intentionality of it between the composition of it as well as the color choices, I believe that it best exhibits kind of unity and variety, which is, it shows that high variety through the amount of detail that it has in the different objects around the room. I really like slightly more busy subjects, but through the colors, through all the greens as well as the reds and purples that are kind of scattered throughout, I believe that that really brings the piece together into a piece that I am very, very proud of.